pattern sheet filled up, then it's time to pick your favorite of your patterns. For example, I like this one, and I really like this one, but I think my favorite out of all of them has to be this one. So I think I am going to take this one and make it into my stamp. Here's how you're going to do that. You're going to have a piece of styrofoam. It's just like a styrofoam plate. So you have to be careful because you could break it in half pretty easily if you really wanted to, but you don't want to, do ya? So I'm going to take this styrofoam plate and I am going to look at my design and I'm going to put it on here. Now, if it's not exactly perfect or it's not exactly the same, that is okay, because it does not have to be perfect. It does not have to match exactly. Okay? So I'm going to take a pencil, and the best type of pencil for this is a dull pencil. This is a sharp pencil with a point on the end, but this dull pencil will make it a lot easier to put my design into my styrofoam plate. So I'm going to take my pencil and I'm just going to look design, and I am just going to start drawing that design right onto my plate, just like this. So as I am putting my design on my styrofoam plate, I'm noticing that I have some empty space up here that I don't have on here. So I am just going to add some different patterns just to keep it going so there's not empty space. And as you put your patterns, you're just gently drawing on the styrofoam. Try not to tear it, try not to make a hole in it. Just draw and make little indentions right in that styrofoam. Just like that. Maybe add a couple more, and voila! I think this will do very nicely. So now I have my styrofoam printing plate with a really cool design of patterns on it. Once you have finished your plate, your printing stamp, then it is very important to make sure to turn it over, take a Sharpie, and write your name with a Sharpie on the back. Okay, so we have been working on our stamps. We have made a stamp using some of the patterns we came up with, and it is now time to make our background. So you can't just make a stamp because then you don't have anything to stamp it on. So we're going to now make a background for us to actually stamp our stamp on. So here's how we're going to do this. You're going to have a white piece of paper, and this square white piece of paper is going to be the background for your stamp. You want to make your background really interesting. So you can choose either cool colors, which are blue, green, and purple, or warm colors, which are red, yellow, and orange. So you could choose red, yellow, and orange, or, which that's just red and yellow right now, blues, purples, and greens. I think I'm going to go with cool colors. These are some of my favorite colors. So I'm going to use these to make my background. Here's how you do that. So your goal is to take your markers and to color all over the sheet. This is one time that scribbling is totally okay. It's also okay if a marker is just a little bit dried out, because for this it will work. The only thing that's really important is that you cover up your whole paper. And I have used cool colors, so warm cool colors, which are blue, green, and purple. If you choose to use reds, yellows, and oranges, or pinks, those are warm colors, and that's totally fine if you want to use those colors. It's just important to keep kind of the color families together for this. So after we cover up the entire paper with marker, we're going to be using a spray bottle to spray the paper. And when you do that, that is going to create kind of a wash. All these colors are going to blend together and kind of, it's called bleeding whenever the colors smear together. And it's going to create a really cool background for your stamp. After you have sprayed your paper with water and put it on the drying rack to let it dry, this is what you're going to get. So you can see how the colors have blended together and you get kind of like a tie-dye look. Awesome for printing on. So this will make a great background for the stamp that we have made. Okay, so now I have my stamp and I am getting ready to start stamping. Here's what you need to know. I have made my design, so when I stamp, I kind of want this to always be in the middle because this will look kind of like a big circle after I stamp it 4 times. So since I know that I want this side to be in the middle, I'm going to put my finger on that part. And on the back, I'm going to take a Sharpie and put a little arrow right there. So if you make your design so you want it to go around, then you need to put a little marker arrow on the back so that you know what part needs to be in the middle. Now, if you make yours where it doesn't really matter which part is in the middle, then you won't really have to worry about it. When it is time to print your stamp, this is what we are going to be using, the materials and tools that you're going to be using in order to print. So first of all, this is going to be what you roll the ink on with. This is called a brayer. A brayer rolls back and forth and makes sure the ink is over all parts of the stamp. So this is a brayer. You're also going to be using ink. Ink is basically like paint, and for us this is a specific kind of ink. It will be black and it washes off because it's water soluble. So hopefully no one's going to go home with newly stained clothes today. All right, and then you're going to have a tray. Now right now I have it on cardboard, but you're going to have a tray that's going to be for the ink. This is the process that you use to print. First of all, you take your brayer and roll it back and forth in the ink. When you hear that sound, kind of like a crackly sound, that means that your ink is just right. Now, after I have my brayer and I've rolled it through the ink just right, I am going to take my stamp. I'm going to put my stamp on my tray. Now, when you're using your fingers, you have to be very careful not to put your fingers in the ink and then put your fingers on your paper. So you're gonna have to be careful. I will have lots of baby wipes and you can always run to the sink if you need to wash it off. But here we go. The stamp is sitting on my tray. I'm going to take the black ink that's on the brayer and roll it on using the brayer. I'm going to go back and forth. I'm going to be really careful until my whole stamp looks covered. You might have to take a finger, hold it down just a little bit. I'm not going to lay my brayer on the table. I'm going to lay it back on the tray with the ink. All right, now here is my paper. And I have to be very careful because we have a square piece of paper and you have a stamp that needs to go on there 4 times. So I'm going to line it up with the bottom corner just like this. And remember, I put an arrow in the middle of mine so that I know what part should go in the center. I'm going to line this up with the corners of my paper and I'm going to press down. I'm going to rub all over with my hands to make sure that this has transferred on. Just like a stamp, you want to make sure that you get all the ink all over it. Okay, now once you have stamped it and you feel like you are sure that it has stamped really well, then you can lift up a corner and pick it up, and your stamp will be on your paper. Okay, now doing this again, I'm going to take my stamp and put it back on my tray, because now I have to move this to the side. Now I have to add more ink to my stamp. So I'm going to go back, roll some more ink, and now I'm going to ink my stamp again, which means to add more of the ink to my stamp. Okay, I lay the brayer back in the ink tray. Then I'm going to take my stamp back to my paper very carefully, and I'm just holding the very edges of this so I don't get much ink on my fingers. Now this time, remember I put my arrow here, I want it to stay nice and lined up, so you have to be very careful to line it up before you place it down. I'm going to put my stamp down, and I'm not going to wiggle it around. So if you put it down and it's not exactly where you want it to be, that's okay, because even Miss Starnes makes mistakes sometimes. Now be sure not to put your hand in the stamp where you have stamped before, and we're going to rub the back of this really good all over to make sure it goes down really good. And then I'm going to lift just using my fingertips, try to not move it around or wiggle it around, and then pick it up. And so you can see how my stamp is working out really nicely. Okay, so once you print 4 times, 1, 2, 3, 4, you can see that my design is now on all of here. Now I want to show you a couple places. There are some places where I didn't get enough ink on my stamp, and so it did not stamp very well, and that is something that you have to watch out for. But otherwise, everything worked out pretty well, and it does make a really cool design. So as you're making yours, just keep that in mind, that when you stamp, you want to make sure you get all the ink on all the little parts, and as you stamp, make sure you take your time and try to line up your square so that it stamps exactly 4 times. Don't stamp off the edge of the page, don't do it right in the middle, not like this, in each of the 4 corners. Okay, so that is your stamping project. Happy stamping!